The Toronto Maple Leafs announced today that defenseman Jake Muzzin will miss the remainder of the season with a cervical spine injury. What does this mean for Muzzin's future? And what does this mean for the Toronto Maple Leafs as they look to approach the trade deadline? What's up, Leafs fans, and welcome back to Leafs Digest. If you're new here or if you've been here before and you have not hit that subscribe button, please make sure to do so now. We're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the playoffs, and every single subscriber counts. So if you can just take 2 seconds and hit that subscribe button, that would be greatly appreciated. But as it was announced today, the Toronto Maple Leafs did put out a PR memo letting people know that defenseman Jake Muzzin will miss the remainder of the season. That would be regular season and playoffs this year with a cervical spine injury. Jake Muzzin is a 34-year-old defenseman who only played in 4 games this season. He was coming in at a $5.625 million cap hit for this season and next, on top of what he had already played for this Leafs team. And unfortunately, it looks like this might be the end of the road for Jake Muzzin. So now talking about what this means for his future before we get into what this means for the Leafs. First things first, I wish Jake Muzzin the best. I hope he is going to be okay for life beyond hockey, because ultimately that is what's most important here. When you are dealing with spine, back, neck, brain injuries, those things are very, very difficult that cause problems for you in life post-hockey. So that is most important to prioritize. He's 34 years old. He's got a family. At this point, you've dealt with concussions, back injuries, neck injuries with this team over the past few seasons, all in a very compact amount of time. At some point, it becomes the optimal thing to do is just to look out for your future beyond hockey, what your rest of your life is going to look like, how you can recover, and make sure you're not putting yourself in a situation where you could cause further damage that could actually hinder the remainder of your life. So I hope that Jake Muzzin is able to fully recover from this. I wish him the best going forward, but unfortunately, as it stands right now, I mean, time will tell, but it does really, really feel like this might be the end of Jake Muzzin's career in the NHL. It is unfortunate. I just hope that on top of everything, above all else, he is just okay, and he will be okay in his life, in his day-to-day, because that is what is most important here. But moving on to what this means for the Leafs team for this coming for this season, for the remainder of it, and as we approach the trade deadline, I personally believe this doesn't change anything. I honestly sit here and I assume, and maybe I'm wrong to assume, but I do assume that the Toronto Maple Leafs have been operating for at least the last month and a bit with the idea in mind, or the notion that Jake Muzzin will not return to this team. I think looking at the trades that they made for Ryan O'Reilly and Nola Chari, the fact that you're basically sitting here now with $4 million of cap space ahead of the deadline that you can use at that date, I think that the Leafs had this in mind the entire time. We've heard rumors of them calling different teams about defensemen, about other types of forwards, about adding to this team. And ultimately, if you're going to see a return of Jake Muzzin at any point, you would have to assume that this Leafs team would have felt that that was coming and would have prepared for that via some of these trades. Maybe you look at the O'Reilly one, and rather than having so much salary retained by other people, you look at a situation where maybe a player off this roster gets shipped out the door to move money around, and then that saving money and people retaining salary comes a little bit later on. But I believe that where this Leafs team is at, what they've done so far this season, they have been operating with this injury in mind and with the likelihood that Jake Muzzin won't return. So that's where I'm at with what the Leafs' plan is going forward, just in terms of how do they handle this news. I don't think it's a surprise to them. I truly believe that they've known. It kind of just came down to a deadline of where you have to announce it and make it official of what's going to happen. That day happened to be today, but I highly doubt that this was a surprise to them that they found this out today. This is likely something they've known for a little bit, something they've been able to prepare for, get ready for, make some moves around, and start calling other teams in preparation of bringing someone else in if this were to be the case. I believe strongly that they knew well in advance of this news. So I don't think their game plan changes. But what does this mean for what the Leafs need? This is really hard to pinpoint. We've seen guys coming in and out. We've seen guys that they're maybe interested in. But at this point in time, to really solidify where this team is going into the playoffs, if you want to feel good about them, you want to feel good about where their game is at and what they could do in the playoffs, I think you got to look to a big name defenseman here. You might be looking at a guy who could come in and maybe play a role much like what Josh Manson did with Colorado. He could be a top 4 guy. He just becomes an impact player, slots guys down the lineup. But with Jake Muzzin out, the impact that he made on this team when he was playing, the playoff performer that he is, the veteran presence who had won Stanley Cups, it is hard to replace that. It's hard to replace that around the room. But I think you got to try to find a way to fit in a guy who can play at least a similar style, even if it is a Jake Muzzin light, per se. Maybe if it is a Gavrikov or something like that, but it has to be a heavier, defensive-minded, defensive-prioritized defenseman who can skate well and move the puck, but they have to be defensive-minded and likely, in this situation, physical to replace that Muzzin position. Jake Muzzin was a beast of a player. He was a guy who could throw guys around, throw big hits, good passer. He could get the puck out of the zone quickly, get it up ice quickly. He had a pretty good shot. He was able to be an effective player in the lineup, and above all else, he knew how to play in the playoffs, and that was a very, very important thing here in Toronto, having guys who know how to play in the playoffs. So maybe you don't get a guy who's got the crazy veteran experience of being in the playoffs, but maybe you can find yourself with a guy who is a veteran around the league and plays a similar style. I think that's where they look to go with this. Maybe just a slight upgrade over what Muzzin is, and or just a slight replacement, maybe a slightly below level of what Jake Muzzin was, but that would still be ahead of what some of these guys in the lineup are, i.e. number 3 for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Justin Holl, and potentially push him out of the lineup. If you can roll in with a Riley, Brody, Gio, Player X, Sandy, and Liljegren, you can go into the playoffs with that. I think you feel a lot more comfortable than with where your D is at right now, as we do feel like there are holes in this lineup and what they have and what they can potentially bring. So I think that's kind of where the focus shifts on this is, okay, now can we get a Jake Muzzin style player to come in here, because we are not going to have Jake Muzzin for these playoffs. I think that should be the goal, but ultimately I don't think their mindset has changed. I think the Leafs have already kind of thought about this and started prepping, calling teams and looking for players who can play that way, can fit that style. I'm not of the belief that they found this out this morning and said, oh my God, all right, well, we got to replace Jake Muzzin. They knew this was coming, and I think that there is a contingency plan in place to move forward and try to find that player. I also do have some faith in Jordy Ben and what he can do. I think he could be potentially that Muzzin light that could step up, but he's much better suited as an extra guy here rather than being a guy that we have to rely on to go into the lineup night in, night out. Leafs fans, if you enjoyed the content, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel. We are trying to get to 5K by playoff time, so every subscriber counts. It really helps us out, helps us get out there, and liking these videos does as well. If you want to let me know your comments and how you feel about the Muzzin news, what you think the Leafs should do going forward, please let me know in the comments below. I do read them. Often bring them up on some of the live streams, talk about them in there, about how people are feeling, and sometimes bring them up in future videos. So if you have comments, you have thoughts, concerns, whatever it may be, let me know in the comments below. I will go through them, I will read them, and I will try to respond to some of them. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for tuning in on a regular basis. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. We'll see everyone very soon. Keep believing.